I called to talk to the guy about it. The guy's like, too bad, I'm going to sell it cheaper. Sorry. So my dad's like, okay. So he went out and got his own concrete molds. And we started making angels and, benches and all that kind of stuff, a few planters. When I came in 2012, it took me about a year to realize, you know what can be the best in the world at? What are we passionate about? It's planters. So I cut everything within a few years. I cut everything that wasn't a planter. It was massive controversy, tons of headwind. This is going to be a disaster. You're going to lose all these customers. But I knew where we were going, and so when we transitioned to planters, cast stone planters, it took off.
Listen, hey, welcome to the Know Me Network, where I interview business owners, entrepreneurs, and industry experts on a little more personal level. And today we have special guest Forrest Jackson. Forrest is the CEO of Jackson Pottery and Jackson Cast Stone. Is that right? Is it Cast Stone?
Jackson Cast Stone.
Cool. Well, hey, listen, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you, and I look forward to getting to know you. Tell me a little bit about Jackson Pottery, and you've probably been the oldest long-standing CEO that I can find. It looks like your start year was in 1986. At the age of 9, you became the CEO.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think I was more like delivery guy in 1986. I was a pro though. I was a pro that was tough though, because I had to learn to speak Spanish. I had to learn how to talk to customers. It was tough. At 9 years old, difficult.
So this is a family-owned business. So you basically got in the shop. What's your earliest memory of being a part of the business?
My earliest memory was when the business first started, which was if you're in the Dallas area, it was down off Tollway and Lemon Avenue, and it was just a small little warehouse with Italian pottery in it, and then a few little plant stands and things out front. That was my oldest memory. I was just a kid. But, I grew up taking things out to people's cars and making deliveries. And I remember all kinds of things. Like there was a statue that almost fell on me when I was a kid, and all kinds of crazy scenarios that probably you couldn't do anymore.
Yeah. So my dad was a band director, and I remember running around his band hall. So I can imagine growing up with a dad who had a warehouse full of stuff, what it was like running around there.
Yeah, it was a lot. We actually, as kids, we used to play hide and go seek in the warehouse too. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, so I'm sure that by this time you can probably drive a forklift, and you mentioned speaking Spanish. What are some of the things that looking back, you're like, man, this business taught me a lot?
Yeah, it has taught me a lot. Speaking of forklift, I interviewed a guy one time who said, "Listen, I currently have a company jet, and I'm going to need that." And I'm like, fantastic. We have forklifts, and we'll give you a company forklift after you've been here 10 years, maybe, and it's fully depreciated. Yeah, so some of the skills, being on the retail floor growing up, because our business, Jackson's Home and Garden, is our sister company, and that's really how the business started, was a retail store. And so I grew up learning how to talk to customers. I grew up being very nimble, whirling around like a dervish, waiting on customers. Weekends were full-blown pandemonium, especially in the springtime. Grew up working very hard. Probably that's the number one thing I learned, is the power of hard work. And as I got older and learned more about the business, working smarter and having strategies and development. And then I moved into the wholesale side. There really wasn't a lot of training for that. I had to learn that a lot on my own by trial and error and asking questions and meeting with different folks. So the business is multidimensional, and it's caused a lot of stretching for me. It's been great.
Yeah. So the business, you said you were a kid. So business started, Home and Garden, Jackson Home and Garden started when now?
The 1983, it started out. It's actually called Jackson Pottery, or Jackson Lemon Avenue Pottery back then. And
Okay.
it was one retail store with a warehouse, and it was sold Italian terracotta and a few plants. And then
So talk to me about how, your dad came about doing this. Did he just say, hey, I'm gonna get in the pottery business? How did you get this idea? Just how do you get into this business?
Yeah, people ask me that often. my dad grew up on a farm. He grew up very, very poor, and he was the first one in his family to go to high school, or excuse me, go to college. Well, point of fact, his dad could not read or write. My grandmother had to sign his name, so that gives you an indication of kind of the situation my dad grew up in. So when he graduated college, the only business he really knew well was dry cleaning and laundry, because his mom had worked in one. And even though he'd worked for Monsanto for a little bit, he started driving around town and going to people's dry cleaning and laundry, saying like, "Hey, I'm Bob Jackson, and I'm interested in getting into the dry cleaning and laundry business, and I know it. And would you sell to me? And would you finance me?" Because I mean, he still didn't have any money. And he finally found somebody who would, and so he started developing dry cleaning and laundry centers. Fast forward, he started buying the shopping centers and got into real estate. And so when he came upon this pottery warehouse, is what it was called Lemon Avenue Pottery. And truthfully, Chris was just in the way. He just wanted the shopping center to put a dry cleaning and laundry in. And this guy said, I'm not selling you this location unless you buy my pottery company. And he's like, I don't want a pottery company. I want to buy your warehouse. The guy said, sorry, I'm not selling. So he went home and told my mom, and my mom was like, you are never home right now. You're operating all these dry clean laundries all over Dallas. I don't want you to buy a pottery company. So he went back, told the guy no. And then the guy said, listen, I'll make you a deal. I'll take you and your wife to Italy, show you the factories. If you like it, great. If not, no big deal. So on this trip back, he had an epiphany and said, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. So he sold all the dry cleaning laundries, got into the pottery business, and started Jackson Lemon Avenue Pottery, started developing and growing that as a retail store. Blew up in the 90s as a wholesale company. And then we've grown it significantly, exponentially, the last 5 to 7 years as a wholesale distributor and manufacturer. Jackson Pottery separating the two entities. So
really cool story. So I guess that's where the Italian vibe comes from the beginning.
That's right.
Okay, cool. So do you remember Dad being a dry cleaning guy?
Yeah, I do, because I was 9, but I remember prior to that, yeah, going to dry clean laundry, and he had still some of them he had to sell. He sold a bunch of them to Chuck Howley, Dallas Cowboys guy. Who was
really. So your dad just is a natural kind of serial entrepreneur, if you will.
I think when you grow up as difficult as he did, he made the decision that I'm going somewhere, and he did.
Interesting. That's a lot to learn from as a serial entrepreneur, having him as a dad, right?
Oh yeah, it's never a dull moment. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. So we've gotten the company, but you're not just a CEO, you're a dad, and you're from Dallas originally, right? You're from here?
Yep, from here. I have 3 boys.
3 boys. How old are they?
17, 14, and 10.
So I only have 2 boys, and I know how my faith has grown just in being responsible for 2 men. How has being a dad grown you into a better leader, a better CEO? What can you kind of look back and say, you know what, my kids have really taught me some things as a businessman?
It's a great question, Chris. Loving my kids for who they are, not for who I am or what I see as similar or who I want them to be, but loving them for who they are and appreciating that, it's been capital.
Yeah.
Because my employees are different. They're all different from one another. And so we do different personality tests and assessments and talk to them a lot and ask for their opinion. There's a value in someone being seen. My kids appreciate it. I'm not saying I always hit it, because I don't. But that's important for employees too. And I think that having a family, having children, so you slow down and start to ask, who is this person? Because it doesn't matter how well you throw the football if nobody can catch it, right? So I might be playing the right cards or saying the right things, but if my kids can't understand it or not getting it, or I'm not speaking to their hearts, it doesn't do any good. It's the same thing with employees, leaders, anyone. Marriage, very similar.
Yeah, that's a good word. I got to tell you though, having 3 boys and having employees, but especially 2 boys for me, it is not easy. Mine are small. I have a guy here at our church that says, it gets easier, but having 2 little guys is a tough one. I always gravitate toward the the dads that have more than one little boy. It's like you kind of get what's going on.
Yeah, no, it's a circus. Like, I think one time my boys, I was trying to teach one how to swim, and the other one who couldn't swim decided to just jump in. So I'm holding this one, trying to keep him up, and the other one's going to the bottom. So I throw that one up. I go down to get the second one, catch the other one on the way back up. I'm holding both of them coming out of the water. That's about what it's like.
It's definitely grows your faith. That's for sure. That's for sure. So you also aren't just the CEO too. You've done some other things in your careers, kind of business coaching, encouraging, those sort of things. So I feel like maybe you know, is there a place for that? What's that look like for you?
Yeah, you know, and it's funny because as your kids start to mature and get into high school years or junior high, middle school years, you do turn into more of a coach. And I think as I've grown in my business career, I've tried to move more toward coaching. So recently I hired a chief operating officer for Jackson Pottery for the wholesale, and entered into more of a coaching role and less of a day-to-day business role. So that's a good natural fit for me. Coaching, helping other people win, asking critical questions. Some people like my questions, some people don't, like my wife points out. But yeah, I have done things. I've done real estate. My academics is varied. I have a lot of diverse interests. So
yeah, and where did you get your we talked about this the other day, but you know, talk about your journey from college, you know, and how you kind of see your boys going through that journey as well. I know they're not there yet, but I'm sure they're starting to talk about these things. So how do you kind of see your story fitting with theirs and kind of letting them be seen through all of that?
And each kid is different in how they view it. The 10-year-old doesn't care about anything much. He's just more of, I want to be a YouTube star. The 14-year-old wants to be a professional boxer. But the other day he told me I want to go to college and be a psychologist. So that was interesting, or a professor. I think it's interesting. And then my oldest kid is a real intellectual who thinks college is a total waste of time because kids end up being in debt and not knowing. It's just total waste of my time. It's all age appropriate stuff.
And that's your oldest. So what's he planning on? What's he thinking about? You know, I can't imagine my 17-year-old. I don't have him yet, but I can only imagine him telling me these things.
That's it. So you learn not to fight it. If you fight it, then it just becomes, that's what I'm going to do. So instead it's like, hey, fantastic. What's your plan? I'll help you develop an alternate plan. And you trust that the Lord will bring him around to the right decision, whether it's college or not, for him. But like responding, oh no, you got to go push. It's not going to work. I mean, he's too obstinate.
Yeah. So do they take any interest in the business?
Yes and no. So I tell my kids something different than a lot of folks. I tell my kids, if this is what you like and you think you can be good at it, you should do it. If you're interested, do it. If you're not, there's no pressure from me. I only want what's best for you. So people will pay top dollar to hear you come and play with passion the things that you enjoy and are good at. So I want them to do whatever they're supposed to do, you know.
Yeah, that makes me think about, you know, some of the arts, if you will, that have kind of been lost, all due to everyone needs to go out and make money, go make money, go make money. Well, what about the beauty of art and, you know, all of that comes with it? So the humanity side of it. So I think about those things. That's interesting.
Yeah, we have those conversations in our house. We try to have in-depth conversations about life and reality. And I like to think we do a pretty good job. I mean, all parents are going to mess with their kids to some degree, right? I mean, so I told my boys the other day, I said, guys, there will be a time when you will have to absolutely forgive me and forgive your mom. You're not there yet quite, but there'll be a time when you look back and you realize, man, these guys were crazy, terrible mistake. I get it. You will have to forgive us.
Oh man, let's just pray for them to have forgiving spirits already, right?
I mean, but they need it because that's freedom for them.
Totally. Listen, yeah, there's a lot of growth in fatherhood, and in the business side, they kind of go hand in hand. You know, you got a lot to be responsible for. But the business that you guys have here has grown. Tell me what you think you've seen, some of the coolest things you've seen about the business from, hey, when I was a 9-year-old, I remember my dad buying this place, to some milestones. I remember when we did this and we grew to that, and oh my gosh, we couldn't believe this. So talk about that as a young kid growing up, seeing your dad's business, and then all of a sudden kind of like, hey man, this is our business. And, you know, that transition of just what you guys went through.
Yeah. So I left when I went to college, I left the family business. I was gone for about 10 years. I came back in 2005. When I came back to mainly work at the retail store, Jackson's Home and Garden. The wholesale was at a certain level where it was just sort of maintaining a great customer base. The guy who's running it did a phenomenal job maintaining and keeping our customers engaged. The retail store grew and developed, and we started adding additional departments like patio furniture, and the Christmas department blew up. So we started just slowly adding on and refining. And then in 2012, I moved over to be at the wholesale side. We had a guy doing this a long time who was doing a lot of the ordering and doing a lot of the operations. I moved over to take that role, which was tough because, man, I didn't know anything about wholesale. I didn't know anything about wholesale. I grew up in retail, and it was a lot for me to learn. And the milestones were revenue generators, huge revenue generators, just big change. Well, huge, big for that because it was just a small business. And then probably manufacturing our own planters. That was big. Manufacturing our own concrete planters.
And you guys did that locally, or did you guys do that?
Sell same location at our wholesale location.
Really? So you guys sourced that out and had to learn how to do that?
Yeah, we got into that. The story behind that is my dad was actually buying concrete benches and things from a guy locally, and the guy was out there competing with us, selling to us wholesale and then selling under wholesale, retail, and advertising it. My dad called to talk to the guy about it. The guy's like, "Too bad, I'm going to sell it cheaper. Sorry." So my dad's like, "Okay." So he went out and got his own concrete molds, and we started making angels and, you know, benches and all that kind of stuff, a few planters. When I came in 2012, it took me about a year to realize, you know what can be the best in the world at? What are we passionate about? It's planters. So I cut everything within a few years. I cut everything that wasn't a planter. It was massive controversy, tons of headwind. This is going to be a disaster. You're going to lose all these customers. But I knew where we were going, and so when we transitioned to planters, cast stone planters, it took off. And then we transitioned into selling garden centers. We don't sell the cast stone planters to garden centers hardly anymore. We sell them to landscapers and then a few distributors. That was another headwind people didn't like. But I knew that the focal point had to be going after and getting those key accounts and going after and getting the customers that would benefit from that planter the most. So yeah, that's what we did. And then, of course, the last milestone, well, there's several. We added distribution. We added some big box business for our pottery lines. But the leadership teams, the evolution and development of leadership teams and the individuals inside our company, they're top-notch people, incredible people.
Yeah, so I can only imagine, you know, building a team, you know, hey, listen, you come to a point where it's like, hey, this is out of my wheelhouse here. I need to hire an expert, if you will. And so what have you learned from that team, putting them in place? You know, I can, like, in-house experts, right?
Yeah, and if you can't value someone who's totally different than you, or if you're threatened by them as a leader or intimidated by them, that's very common. You'll never go to the level where we're headed. You just can't, because then it becomes, I'm threatened by the fact that Chris can run a better podcast than me. And then you end up hiring not Chris, but someone lesser. So you have to hire people smarter than you. And you also have to know, you know what, this is not my wheelhouse. This is yours. And then support them, let them run.
Yeah, people need that. People need that. Yeah, those are some cool milestones. Having a business grow like that, you know, when we say small business of getting this on Lemon Avenue and the tollway, how many employees are here at this business, you know, back in 85-ish, 83-ish?
5.
Okay, wow. And then how many employees are here today across both companies?
At the retail, across both companies, around 150 to 160.
Wow, that's incredible. So like how responsible are for you of kind of helping build that employee base? Is there anybody there that you look back and you're like, hey man, I was responsible for that guy?
Um, yes. Probably on the retail side, I have been out of that for a while, and my dad's had some people who've been there for quite some time, and there's some great people there as well. On the wholesale side, um, it's been a joy for me to see people promoted and moved into the right positions. I had a guy in the warehouse who started out as a kid, seriously, like 17, 18 years old, who now runs our logistics department. And when he bought his first house, it was the biggest day for me. It's the biggest day. Huge opportunity, huge accomplishment for me, even though it was he and his family who benefited the most. So
Yeah,
it's been great to see.
that's awesome. And I think that goes to be a testament of just the power and the love of small business in general. I wish there was more of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a love-hate relationship. It reminds me when I wrestled in high school. Some days I loved it, some days I hated it, was crying. So it just depends. Hey, small business is no joke. It's not for everybody. I mean, a lot of people who say, yeah, I was a business for myself for a couple of years. Tough. Yeah, it's tough.
It is. There's a hole in the boat for me here. You talked about going missing for 10 years prior to coming on board. What happened in that 10 years?
Um, I moved to California. I lived there. I went to school, got an undergraduate in psychology, and lived out there afterwards. Um, I One of the most interesting things I did when I got a psych degree was I went and worked in a mental hospital when I was in. I know this, I didn't even talk about any of this before, Chris. This is all new stuff, and I
This is
got all kinds
good.
of material.
Yeah.
About half of it's true. I'm kidding. I went and worked in a mental hospital, and man, that was a game changer. Your perspective on life changes completely. I don't remember if it's Tolstoy or who it was talked about the importance of looking in prisons and mental hospitals if you want to understand your population, because we don't look at it.
Interesting.
So yeah, that was a game changer for me. I'd never seen anything like that. It was an adolescent lockdown unit, and had experiences there. Um, it was transformative. Let's put it that way. When I got out of college, I was sick in my stomach every day because I had no idea what I was going to do. So I know a lot of people think college is the way, and it's probably where my kids get it. They get out of college and they don't know what they're doing, and they think they're going to go out and get a $80,000 or $100,000 job, and they end up working, for 35,000 or 40,000. It's pretty common. So it's important to have a plan. I did not. I had no idea what I was doing. I ended up working campus safety because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I worked for my dad for about 8 or 9 months. Did not like that. Moved back to California and went and got a master's degree in theology. Yeah, and learned a lot
So
through that as
no
well.
interest in being a psychologist or a therapist along the way?
I like to solve problems. When I was in the mental hospital, I don't know how deep you want me to get into this.
Go for it.
It'd be fascinating for your podcast listeners.
Yeah,
It'd be
totally.
fascinating. They'll turn it off. So I was in I was in a group circle with a guy. This is terrible. He's telling his kid, the kid's, you're worthless. You're worthless to me. The dad is telling this to the kid. And the therapist is trying to intervene. And the therapist says to the kid, hey, you're valuable. And the kid says, why am I valuable? He's like, because I think you're valuable. He said, who are you? You're my therapist. He's like, well, you should value yourself. I don't value myself. So secular setting, you can't tell that kid God values you. He made you uniquely, and you have value because of that. You can't tell him that. So I began to ask bigger questions. So if I can't solve this from a human perspective, horizontal perspective, how do I solve the bigger questions from a vertical perspective? So I went to seminary for that reason. To ask bigger questions about that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Not everyone just goes to seminary. And you're how old at this point? You kind of, sounds like you left college and then kind of went a couple years off and then went back.
I made it about 8 or 9 months working for my dad, and then I'm like, oh man, I'm not doing this. But what do you know at 21 years old? Nothing. I mean, nothing. You come into a business out of school where you learn about in business school all these things, and you think like, look at all these things that they're doing wrong here. It's amazing how smart my dad has gotten in the last 20 years. You see a lot of different things, and I'm sure my kids will say the same.
Yeah.
But
Kind
yes,
of the generational thing there that comes down, it's kind of, we've learned from our parents. My therapist likes to say that, we're the good and the bad of both mom and dad, right?
yeah. There is again, how do you appreciate people who are different than you? Can you? Should you? And how will you be blessed if you do? It's a real challenge.
Yeah. It is. It is. I think that's all in relationships and treating people the way you want to be treated. And, when you've got 150 employees, I can't imagine people not getting their feelings hurt along the way, right?
Yeah, mainly me got my feelings hurt. Yes.
I mean, that's probably true. Think about how, if you're the head coach, it all falls on your head, right?
Yep. Small business, having to terminate people and all that. It's never fun. Never.
Yeah. Looking back at just kind of the hiring and firing of all of this, was there ever some situation in the hiring and firing process that you were just like, man, this one memory was, I wish I could do it over again? Or, hey, I had a great experience with hiring this person. Just talk about that experience that you've had, some ones you wish you might have back.
Man, that's a mixed bag. There's been a lot of things I wish I'd done differently. You never know how much to explain to somebody when you're terminating them. There's all the legal rules and things. There's a lot of I wish I could say. I don't think I'm alone in that. A lot of managers and business owners believe that. You have to have pretty strong boundaries, because I'm not here to coach somebody or help them like, hey, the reason you're losing your job is performance, and part of it, but some of it's because of how you make people feel. That might be too much for that person to swallow at that point. I'm not sure I'm the best person to tell them that. I've had other situations where I was glad to fire somebody because of how they were treating someone else. I don't like bullies. I don't put up with that. In terms of hiring, I've hired people and said, man, you're phenomenal. I have no idea what role you're going to be in, but I know you're going to be great, and I'd love to offer you a job. We'll figure it out. And they're still with me today.
That's cool. That's cool. I guess some of that theology degree has taught you about humanity through psychology as well. And I can tell that you really have a love for just people and even your employees, for sure. So it's neat to see that.
Yeah, I do care about my employees.
Where do you guys see in a few years? You've kind of said you've kind of taken this role as kind of more of the CEO, the coaching role. Do you see yourself kind of taking on some consulting gigs in the future? What do you see with the Jackson companies? Where do you see those and yourself? Do you see you guys merging together or kind of working together in the future?
You talking about the Jackson Soma Garden and Jackson Pottery?
Yeah, the pottery and the cast stone. I mean, that's kind of your business, but like I hear you want to do this coaching piece too. Is that something that you can do both? And is this maybe a new business that you're looking at in the future?
So the Jackson Pottery is well established. Jackson Cast Stone is also on an exponential growth curve. I believe we have the guys put in place who are going to build the systems to make that easier. I still come in as a visionary component, but I do have some excess capacity, and I love to help people win. I'm exploring different options for coaching, or I had a guy the other day say, hey, maybe I could set you up with some fractional work as a fractional CEO, or coming in to ask critical questions of venture capital firms and things like that. That's certainly possible. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll start a podcast. You put Joe Rogan out of business, man, for sure.
There you go. There you go. So help me understand the businesses and how they kind of coincide together. So you've got Jackson the garden, and you have Jackson Pottery. Are they one and the same?
They technically are one and the same, but they're run independently. My dad runs Jackson's Home and Garden. I own I don't own, we're on a track to own Jackson Pottery and Jackson Cast Stone. My dad technically owns all of it because he started it all, but we're in transition on some of the entities.
So how do they work together? Or is it just your guys are the whole side, and you talked about bringing the businesses together so they talk better? Is that something that you're fully in charge of moving forward?
The businesses are just two different. Jackson's Home and Garden and Jackson Pottery are distinctive because number one, the leader of each, my dad on one side and me on the other, different personalities. And it's different culture. Retail culture is different than a wholesale and a manufacturer. So probably Jackson's Home and Garden would be our biggest client.
Gotcha.
And that's the way I see it.
Gotcha. And then you guys are going out to the landscapers. So you guys have a whole sales team that's going out and contracting with these landscapers and so forth all over the country or locally?
Our biggest foot on landscapers is locally, but we do have an inside team that contacts and works with different people, whether it's from casinos to municipals to different landscape architects and all over the country. We do that. We also have a sales team that goes after garden centers. That's our bread and butter, is independent garden centers. And then we work through distribution. So we have other distributors in other parts of the country to whom we ship our products, and they distribute it to those small garden centers or sometimes larger garden centers too.
Yeah, so I saw a video you posted about your wife going to box store, if you will.
Yeah, you need to get in trouble on that. Yeah, my wife, she's phenomenal. She's an unbelievable designer, and it's just natural to her. She wasn't trained in it. She just knows how to do it. And so when she sees something that she finds attractive for the home, she buys it. And I could probably retire tomorrow if she would get into flipping houses and just like designing and flip. I mean, she's like, nah, I don't want to do that.
It's a good problem to have with your wife. That is. But my question is, do you see yourself getting into some of those bigger box stores in the future?
We're in them. We sold Lowe's before. We sold Menards. We sell Home Depot. We try to keep it separate. We like to do our best to respect the independent garden center and try to keep it separate as best we can. It's not always possible. I mean,
so is there like a niche around the specific pottery that you guys are putting out there? Do you only specialize in a certain, size or model of the pottery, or, or you guys carry a plethora of pottery there?
That's good. Yes, we carry a myriad of different items, nice varieties. So the reason some of the box stores like us is because we're good at designing. We are forward thinking in a lot of our items, even some of them are commodity, but most of our configurations on our assortments are really strong. People like our design and style.
So, yeah, and who's responsible for all the style?
I do some. There's a guy named Dave Oram who does a lot of the designing, and then we get a lot of input. But we're pretty creative.
Interesting. So yeah, I see you sourcing some of this. You're flying all over the world, trying to get some of this pottery. What's it like just going around shopping for pottery? Is it only one place that you source this from, or have you gone all other places around the world to get cool pottery?
Oh yeah, no, we're all over. We travel the world. I mean, we go to Malaysia, all over China, Vietnam, Italy, and we just bought from Thailand. We haven't bought from them some time. We just went back to Thailand. I'm waiting for Cambodia to open up and start developing its own. But every part of the world has its own unique expertise. Truly, there's stuff, people say with China, why don't you just get it from somewhere else? That's not easy to do. China has they've been making pottery since days of yonder, and their ability to make certain styles and designs, nobody else is doing it. So it's hard to do that. Vietnam, very specialized, very different. The price points are going to be all over the place, just depending on the place you're buying from. So it's an adventure. You want to travel, go to Asia and Vietnam, go to some of those factories. It can be wild, wild west. Truly, it can be pretty crazy.
I bet. Where's your favorite place to source pottery from? And like, meaning like not only my favorite place to travel to source pottery, but my favorite pottery itself, because they all kind of probably have different styles, like you said.
Vietnam.
Huh. What's so special about it?
They make really big planners, and they because they are less advanced technologically, they come in with different designs and different colors and styles. They experiment more. The Chinese, not that Chinese don't experiment, but Chinese are very smart about their business model in terms of, hey, this works and let's just continue to plow through it. The Vietnamese are operating more like artists. What's crazy is a lot of the people making pottery in Vietnam are of Chinese descent,
Huh.
because there's that expertise passed down through families. It's generational.
Wow.
But you'll have more experimentation going on in Vietnam with the larger planners, larger landscape planners. From what I've seen. Now, China, again, experiments, but it's usually in a channel that they're experimenting.
Yeah, they're looking at the bottom line and how much we can produce. They're on an Excel spreadsheet, if you will. Fascinating. You know, one question I always like to ask is, hey man, Corona just happened. I know you weren't going to Vietnam during the Corona, so how was being a business owner? Did you ever panic? Were you, what was it like managing employees through this? Just kind of give me a business owner's perspective, and what was it like?
Yeah. I think we were starting as the coronavirus, prior to the shutdowns here in Dallas and different places. It hit us at just like the worst time, because our slow season is from November until about March. And so the shutdown started happening in, I think it was February.
March, really.
Okay.
Here.
But it was slowing up until then. And so we were seeing unusual lack of activity, and we're, oh, man, this could be really bad. And it was really tough. I mean, we had to lay off a lot of people, just because when the shutdowns happened, we had no idea what was going to happen. Well, sure enough, like 2 or 3 months later, we had to hire a bunch of people back. We were having trouble getting them back. But I think at one time I had to lay off 100 people in one day.
Oh man.
It's a tough day. It's a tough day.
That's probably one of the toughest days you've ever had in business, I can imagine. That's a lot of I'm sorry's.
Tough day. Because it would seem so certain. The restrictions were so high, and it seemed so certain that things were just going to come slamming to a halt. And this is before any discussion of PPP money or anything else. So, I mean, I'm having to make decisive action. It was very difficult.
Yeah, because people aren't going out to buy pottery right at that moment. They're trying to figure out how to save their life, and we're getting on lockdown. No one's going shopping.
Right. Yeah. We thought about switching to toilet paper and hand sanitizer just to make it. No.
It's funny. I had a buddy that actually he's in a safety gloves business, and they manufacture safety gloves.
Yeah.
And they went into manufacturing masks and the dresses, whatnot that they wear. And so he's like, man, we loved it during that time.
Yeah, I'm sure he made great money. So the next years following that, though, was Candy Bar the Door. It was so fast, and that continued on, slowing to a taper, and slowed really in July and August of this year, with everything else happening in the world. So.
And is costs of goods and shipping and all that affecting you guys at all?
Oh, for sure. Like everyone else, it's outrageous. It has been, and now it's subsiding. But yeah, it's outrageous. The price changes and things like that. Definitely tough, but I think most retailers did quite well, though.
Yeah, I guess I can see how that could be really scary for you guys as a business. We're kind of this, just a pottery industry, if you will. And, there wasn't, people weren't mowing their lawns. People weren't doing anything at that point in time. It's kind of like, if this lasted for longer, this could have been, 100 employees in a day. That's just incredible. Yeah.
And then having to hire them back within like a month or two after that, and slowly started bringing them on, and then started bringing them on really fast because it was so busy. And at that time I was involved with Jackson's Home and Garden also. So that was a lot there's a lot of political pushback. People saying, you're not keeping everyone safe, and you should be cleaning the store professionally, top to bottom every day, and the costs, and employees, concerned about what other employees' activities were after work and the pressures of that. No one really had, no one really had a textbook of how to deal with that. One of our retail stores that we sell to, Jack's Pottery sells to, I remember looking on their Facebook page and people blasting them about how they were handling the coronavirus thing. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, man, everybody's doing the absolute best they can with what they have. We're not running hospitals. And
you guys have a warehouse, for crying out loud,
Well, the wholesale too. The wholesale was fine. Generally speaking, we complied with all the laws and rules, but it was easier than a retail. Retail store was tough because you'd get a lot of emails and messages about who's doing what, who's not doing what. Very, very tough. Should we demand that customers do this and that? Very, very difficult.
Yeah, as a business owner, that's stressful, I can imagine. Thank goodness a lot of that's over for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Looking back, I know we talked a little bit about this earlier. I always like to ask, what would you have told as a, older man now, looking back, what do you wish you could tell Forrest at 25? What wisdom would you embark on your younger self?
What would I tell myself? Probably you are your biggest asset. Your growth and development, personal development, growth and development, health, biggest asset. And I do a lot of personal growth stuff. I read a lot. And I think that never believe you're stuck.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Super easy to get into that. Whether you own a business, run a business, work in a business, work at McDonald's, it doesn't matter. You're not stuck. That's something you told yourself.
Yeah, that's good. You said you like to read. What are you into right now? And any good book recommendations?
And right now I'm doing a lot of podcasting and reading for real estate investment, because I'm doing some other deals with some guys. But most recently I read 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. That was very excellent.
Yeah.
I think I've read Good to Great like 20 times.
Really?
So I revisit that often for the concepts. And then I'll have to look at what it's called here. Be Your Future Self Now, which is about how to look and think about who you want to be in the future and how to bring that into the present and move that direction. That's by Dr. Ben Hardy. Those are some of the books I've read recently. I read broadly. I try to read things like Tipping Point. As a fiction, I read Count of Monte Cristo a couple of years ago. It's phenomenal, unbelievable book. I'm reading Dune right now. I'll get into all kinds of things.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, I just read a book on the power of homeschooling. Thought it was interesting to read about what the thought process was behind that.
What'd you find interesting about homeschooling?
It's a shift in complete strategy. It is about being with your kids. And we don't homeschool our kids, but I've talked about it recently. After reading the book, I talked about it. It is about a full commitment to be your child's chief influencer. And it flies in the face of what a lot of folks say about how peer influence is even more important. The book would question and say, what is a peer? Didn't ask that question, but ultimately that's what it's saying.
Huh. So what's more important, peers or parents?
Well, what's more important, parents, but it'd be foolish to misstep and say, hey, we don't need peers, because that's just not, it's just a question of who is a peer, because you will become like the average of the 5 people with whom you spend the most time.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? That's amazing. Listen, this was fun. I think you even talked to me a little bit about maybe opening up a podcast. So hopefully that you'll be able to get that going.
Yeah, man, I think it might be torture. Like people be grabbing like pixie sticks and stabbing themselves in the eye if they listen to. What do I got a guy on there and I ask him all these questions that you're asking me, but I ask him in a weird way, like I'm answering them. Oh man, what a beatdown.
No, 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 not at all. Not at all. This was fun. You have a really cool story. You guys have a really cool business that you and you guys have all put together. It's neat to see that, people aren't trying to get rid of their businesses and sell them. It's cool that you care about your employees. Those are cool things that we want to hear about local businesses. And for people out there that haven't heard of Jackson Pottery, you guys, people should go show up and shop. There's all sorts of things that they can get from the home and garden store.
Yeah, I will say my dad has done an incredible job, and that is a true one of a kind experience. It's a great store. It's an icon. I mean, it's done a great job.
Yeah, it's definitely been around for a while. You guys are a Dallas kind of, like you said, icon staple for sure. So
Yeah,
cool
awesome.
business. Keep it up. And thanks for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Hey, appreciate the opportunity, Chris. Thank you.